I never thought the person I loved most could hurt me with just a whisper, but my own daughter did. "Your illness is embarrassing," she said, and in that moment, something inside me snapped. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Clara Boone, and for the past year, I've been battling a rare neurological illness that makes even simple tasks feel impossible. Lenny, my 17-year-old daughter, used to be my pride and joy. She was smart, funny, and always knew how to make me smile. But that night, everything changed. It happened at dinner, at Lenny's friend's house while her friends watched. I could hear the whisper, sharp and cold. I froze, my heart breaking in a way I never imagined. I went home quietly, trying to hold back tears, wondering when my sweet girl had turned so harsh. That night, I decided I would no longer let her cruelty slide. In the weeks that followed, I began to act fragile, letting her take on responsibilities she had always ignored. I watched as she struggled, realizing how much effort goes into managing a household and caring for someone sick. I left little reminders of her hurtful words, letting guilt creep in unnoticed. When she finally confronted me, I only stayed silent, letting her feel the weight of her actions. Eventually, Lenny understood the pain she had caused. She apologized, genuinely this time, and I let her know that trust and respect are earned back slowly. Some silences are louder than words, and some lessons are unforgettable. That day, I realized I could hurt and love at the same time, and justice can come without raising a single voice. Before that night, Lenny and I had a routine that felt normal, even comforting. I was 38, working long shifts as a nurse, coming home exhausted but still trying to greet her with warmth. Lenny, 17 now, had always been bright and ambitious. She loved science projects and debate club, and I remembered the first time she won a regional award. I felt proud, my chest swelling with the kind of happiness only a mother knows. We celebrated together, laughing and sharing stories late into the evening, and in those moments, I thought our bond was unbreakable. But over the past year, I noticed subtle changes. Fatigue weighed heavily on me, and even the smallest chores left me drained. Lenny watched quietly, sometimes frowning, sometimes withdrawing. She no longer shared her daily excitement with me the way she used to, and her smile seemed more polite than genuine. Yet, I held on to hope, convincing myself that teenagers change and distance is natural. We still had moments of connection, morning coffee in silence, brief hugs before school, but beneath it all, a tension was growing. I felt it like a quiet storm building, a distance that neither words nor laughter could bridge. I pushed myself to stay present, hiding the exhaustion, hoping to maintain normalcy. I wanted her to know she could rely on me, even as my body betrayed me. Looking back, I realized that the love I poured into her made the coming betrayal all the more painful. I thought we were strong, that our connection could weather anything. But sometimes, the most profound breaks happen quietly, in moments no one anticipates, before the first words of hurt are ever spoken. That evening, I followed Lenny to her friend's house for a small family dinner. The aroma of roasted chicken and baked bread filled the air, and laughter echoed around the dining room. Gabe was away on a business trip, so it was just the two of us mingling with her friends' families. I tried to stay cheerful, answering questions and complimenting the decorations, though a wave of fatigue lingered under my smile. As the evening wore on, Lenny leaned slightly toward me, her voice barely audible over the chatter. "Mom," she whispered, her tone sharp and cold, "your illness is embarrassing. I don't want anyone to see you like this." The words hit me like a sudden gust of winter wind. My fork froze midair, and the warmth of the room felt like it drained away instantly. I wanted to respond, to explain, to cry, but nothing came out. Her eyes avoided mine, flicking to the floor as if the words had already vanished into the air, leaving only their sting behind. My heart ached in a way I had never imagined possible, a mixture of shock, sadness, and disbelief. I felt exposed, betrayed by the one person I had given everything to protect and nurture. For a long moment, I simply sat there, motionless, letting the whisper reverberate in my mind. The laughter and conversation around us continued, oblivious to the silent rupture that had just occurred between my daughter and me. It was a single sentence, yet it left a wound that no smile or excuse could ever heal. I closed the door to my bedroom and sank onto the edge of the bed, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. The sound of muffled voices from the dinner below felt distant, like it belonged to another world. I wrapped my arms around myself, as if holding together the pieces of a heart that had just shattered. Every memory of Lenny as a little girl, the way she would cling to me when she was scared, the way she used to giggle at my silly jokes, clashed violently with the cruel words she had just whispered. Betrayal weighed heavily on my chest. I had devoted my life to her, sacrificing nights of sleep, hours of rest, and personal dreams, all to give her a future I believed she deserved. And now, in a single breath, she dismissed it, dismissing me. A question formed in my mind, echoing relentlessly, was I ever really enough for her? The pain wasn't just about the words, it was the realization that someone I loved beyond measure could view me with such contempt. My love had always been patient, gentle, and unwavering, yet her harshness cut through it like a knife. I clutched the pillow tighter, feeling the sting of rejection and the cold truth that love alone does not guarantee loyalty or respect. In that quiet room, I confronted the raw depth of my feelings, sorrow, anger, disbelief, and heartbreak all tangled together. Lenny's cruelty had exposed a vulnerability I had never known, and the room felt suffocating with the weight of both my devotion and the bitter sting of her betrayal. For the first time, I understood that some wounds run deeper than anyone can see, hidden behind the mask of everyday life. As the nights passed, I found myself thinking not just about the pain, but about the imbalance between us. I realized that simply crying or retreating would not convey the depth of her wrongdoing. I began to consider ways to make her recognize the weight of her words, without raising my voice or losing control. Every plan I formed was quiet, careful, and calculated, designed to make her confront her actions from the inside out. I decided subtlety would be my ally. Small adjustments, tiny shifts in our routines, moments where she would see the impact of her behavior without me pointing it out directly. I wanted her to feel unease, a lingering awareness that could not be ignored or shrugged off. It was not about punishment for its own sake, but about awakening understanding and remorse. In those hours of reflection, a side of me emerged that I had rarely acknowledged. I was no longer just the exhausted, heartbroken mother, I was strategic, deliberate, and patient. Each choice became a step toward a lesson she could never forget. I mapped scenarios in my mind, situations where her arrogance would meet responsibility, where her disregard would meet consequence, where the truth of her cruelty would become impossible to overlook. For the first time, my pain transformed into purpose. I would turn the hurt she caused into awareness, and she would come to see, in subtle but undeniable ways, how her actions had wounded the person who had always given her everything. It was quiet, deliberate, and unspoken, a plan for justice that required no yelling, no confrontation, only the steady unraveling of guilt. Lenny's confidence had grown into something almost unbearable. At school, she would talk loudly about her plans, the friends she had made, and the attention she received, leaving no room for humility. At home, she barely spoke to me, answering questions with clipped responses or distracted nods. I watched quietly, noting how much energy she spent on appearances, how little thought she gave to those who cared for her most. One afternoon, she announced with a flourish that she wanted to host the school fundraiser at our house. She described decorations, guest lists, and schedules as if she were running a small event company, barely acknowledging the effort it would take to prepare our home. Most parents might have felt proud of her initiative, but I recognized the risk and the opportunity it presented. This was perfect. I could allow her ambition to meet reality, to confront responsibility in a way she had never faced before. I imagined the lessons she would learn about planning, timing, and the physical toll of managing everything alone. My mind turned over the possibilities, each more subtle than the last, each designed to let her overreach and stumble. For the first time since her betrayal, I felt a sense of control. I didn't need to scold or confront her directly, I could let her discover the consequences of her arrogance herself. The fundraiser became more than an event, it became a stage for awareness, a way for her to understand, without words from me, that actions have weight and that maturity comes not from boasting, but from effort and consideration. Quietly, I began preparing, letting her energy and pride carry her toward the lessons she had yet to learn. I began to lean into my weakness, letting my exhaustion show more openly than before. I moved slowly through the house, dropped small tasks unfinished, and offered little resistance when Lenny insisted on taking over. At first, she seemed thrilled, thinking I had finally given her full control. She organized, cleaned, and coordinated with a sense of triumph, confident she could handle everything effortlessly. But the reality was different. She quickly discovered that managing the household while keeping track of schedules, meals, and the countless little details I normally handled was exhausting in ways she had never imagined. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her, and frustration began to surface. She snapped at small setbacks, panicked when something was misplaced, and realized that running the fundraiser while keeping the house in order was far from simple. Watching her struggle, I remained quiet, only offering gentle guidance when absolutely necessary. Every falter, every sigh, every moment of doubt, became part of the lesson I had been planning. She began to understand, in a very tangible way, the invisible labor that I carried daily, how my illness complicated even routine tasks, and how much care it took to maintain a home. It was subtle, almost invisible, but the effect was powerful. Lenny's confidence wavered as she confronted her own limitations, and I felt a small sense of vindication. She had underestimated the effort behind my quiet perseverance, and now, through her own experience, she was beginning to grasp the magnitude of the life she had once dismissed with a careless whisper. I started leaving subtle traces of Lenny's unkindness around the house, careful to make them noticeable yet indirect. A folded note slipped into her backpack, a journal page left on her dresser, hints that reflected moments she had dismissed or mocked. Occasionally, I mentioned little observations to her friends when they visited, letting them casually echo what she had said without seeming pointed. Slowly, she began to sense a shift. The confident, carefree attitude she carried at school started to falter at home. She hesitated before speaking, glanced over her shoulder more often, and seemed to shrink into corners where she once moved freely. There was a quiet unease in her eyes, a flicker of doubt she couldn't quite place. I watched silently, sitting in another room, listening to the subtle changes in her voice, noticing how she paused over chores, replayed conversations in her head, and questioned herself more than before. Each moment of hesitation, every faltered smile, reinforced the effect of the small reminders I had planted. She was beginning to confront her actions without realizing that I had guided her there. The tension grew, almost electric, in the spaces between us. I felt the satisfaction of seeing awareness dawn slowly, watching her wrestle with feelings she had never considered before. The balance of power had shifted quietly but unmistakably. For the first time, Lenny was meeting the weight of her choices, and the lesson I had planned was taking hold in ways that words alone could never achieve. The tension reached its peak one evening as Lenny slammed her bedroom door and stormed into the kitchen, her face flushed with frustration. "Why are you being so cold?" she demanded, her voice sharp but tinged with confusion. I didn't answer. I only looked at her, letting the silence stretch, heavy and unyielding. Her frustration deepened as she searched for an explanation, her words tumbling over one another in a rush of anger and bewilderment. I stayed still, allowing the quiet to speak for me, letting her feel the weight of her own actions pressing against her conscience. Memories surfaced in my mind, every sharp whisper, every dismissive glance, every time she had looked at me as if my existence were a burden. I held on to them, letting the recollection strengthen the lesson I had been carefully orchestrating. At first, Lenny's anger seemed unshakable, but gradually, uncertainty crept in. She faltered mid-sentence, glanced down, and shifted uncomfortably. Questions began to form in her mind. Had she been unfair? Had she truly hurt someone who loved her without condition? The realization unsettled her, the guilt stirring in ways she hadn't expected. For the first time, I saw her reflection of our fractured bond in her eyes, the acknowledgement that her behavior had consequences, that cruelty could not pass unnoticed. I remained silent, watching her wrestle with the understanding she had never confronted before. The silence was heavy, but it spoke volumes, and slowly, the lesson began to settle into her mind, leaving her to face the truth of her actions alone. One quiet evening, I invited Lenny to sit with me in the living room, the soft glow of a lamp casting long shadows across the room. Calmly, I took a small book from the table, her diary, which I had placed where she couldn't miss it, and opened it without a word. She stiffened, eyes wide, but I continued, reading aloud passages that revealed her sharp judgments, her dismissive thoughts, and the moments she had mocked or ignored me. Her face changed with every line I spoke, the confident mask slipping to reveal shock and shame. I read slowly, deliberately, letting each sentence sink in. The words that once floated carelessly in her mind now landed with weight and clarity. I did not add commentary, I did not plead or scold. The diary itself carried the truth of her behavior, and that truth was undeniable. By the time I finished, Lenny was silent, trembling slightly, her hands clenched in her lap. I could see the regret and horror in her eyes, the recognition of how harsh she had been and how deeply she had wounded someone who loved her without reservation. The air was thick with emotion, a mixture of guilt, sorrow, and realization. I remained composed, letting the impact settle fully. Every glance, every hesitation, every shiver of awareness confirmed that my carefully planned lesson had succeeded. She had confronted her cruelty directly, felt it in a way she could not dismiss, and for the first time understood the weight of her own actions. It was quiet, painful, and unforgettable, a revelation she would carry with her forever, a silent testament to the consequences of thoughtless cruelty. One quiet evening, I invited Lenny to sit with me in the living room, the soft glow of a lamp casting long shadows across the room. Calmly, I took a small book from the table, her diary, which I had placed where she couldn't miss it, and opened it without a word. She stiffened, eyes wide, but I continued, reading aloud passages that revealed her sharp judgments, her dismissive thoughts, and the moments she had mocked or ignored me. Her face changed with every line I spoke, the confident mask slipping to reveal shock and shame. I read slowly, deliberately, letting each sentence sink in. The words that once floated carelessly in her mind now landed with weight and clarity. I did not add commentary, I did not plead or scold. The diary itself carried the truth of her behavior, and that truth was undeniable. By the time I finished, Lenny was silent, trembling slightly, her hands clenched in her lap. I could see the regret and horror in her eyes, the recognition of how harsh she had been and how deeply she had wounded someone who loved her without reservation. The air was thick with emotion, a mixture of guilt, sorrow, and realization. I remained composed, letting the impact settle fully. Every glance, every hesitation, every shiver of awareness confirmed that my carefully planned lesson had succeeded. She had confronted her cruelty directly, felt it in a way she could not dismiss, and for the first time understood the weight of her own actions. It was quiet, painful, and unforgettable, a revelation she would carry with her forever, a silent testament to the consequences of thoughtless cruelty. One afternoon, Lenny approached me slowly, her gaze fixed on the floor, hands nervously twisting together. The house was silent, the usual noise of daily life muted as if it sensed the gravity of the moment. She spoke softly, almost a whisper, "Mom. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much I hurt you." Her voice trembled, carrying the weight of genuine remorse. I stayed seated, calm and steady, letting her words settle in the space between us. I did not respond immediately. Forgiveness is not something freely given, it must be earned, understood, and respected. She waited, uncertainty flickering in her eyes, and I let her sit with that, letting her reflect on the pain she had caused and the effort required to repair it. For a long moment, we shared only the quiet, the kind of silence that holds reflection, acknowledgement, and the possibility of growth. In that stillness, I saw a shift in her posture, the way her shoulders relaxed slightly, a subtle recognition that she could not undo the past, but she could learn from it. That moment crystallized everything I had worked toward, the careful orchestration, the patience, the subtle guidance. Betrayal leaves deep scars, but through awareness and accountability, healing becomes possible. I had demonstrated strength not through anger or confrontation, but through deliberate thought and strategic patience. We did not rush into warmth or hugs. Instead, we began rebuilding slowly, each small step rooted in reflection and understanding. My quiet control, the lessons embedded in the aftermath of her actions, had guided her to this point. It was a closure born of patience, insight, and the knowledge that growth often follows the deepest wounds. Sitting alone that evening, I let my mind wander over everything that had happened, the exhaustion, the whispered cruelty, the quiet strategies I had set in motion, and the slow awakening in Lenny. Each step had been deliberate, a mixture of heartache and resolve, teaching lessons without raising my voice. I thought about the delicate balance between love and disappointment, how devotion can be tested in ways no one expects, and how strength often hides behind patience and observation. Betrayal had cut deep, sharper than I ever imagined, but it had also sparked a clarity I might never have discovered otherwise. I realized that revenge is not always loud or dramatic, it can be measured, subtle, and deeply transformative. Watching her confront herself, guiding her toward accountability without shaming or humiliation, gave me a sense of quiet empowerment. I had reclaimed the respect and dignity that had been momentarily lost, turning pain into understanding. Reflecting on the journey, I saw how each challenge had shaped us both. Lenny was no longer the girl who had spoken without thought, she was learning, and I had proven that patience paired with strategy could create change. My heart still ached at the memory of her words, but it also swelled with the knowledge that growth had emerged from the shadow of betrayal. Some silences are louder than words, and some lessons are unforgettable. In the quiet of that realization, I understood the depth of maternal strength, the complexity of justice, and the power of enduring love. These truths would linger, shaping not only my life but hers as well, leaving marks that neither time nor distance could erase.